The year is 1952, and in a basement beneath a shuttered butcher shop on Mulberry Street, they find what's left of Father Bellini. The coroner will not release photographs. The police report is typed, then locked in a drawer that no one opens for 33 years. When a young detective asks his captain why the case was never investigated, the captain lights a cigarette, stares out the window at the rain, and says only this: "Some confessions should never be heard." The FBI keeps no file. The church keeps no record. The newspapers print 4 lines on page 11, calling it a robbery gone wrong. But in the tenements and social clubs where old men play cards and younger men count money, they whisper a different story. They say Father Bellini heard too much. They say he knew the names, the dates, the bodies buried in cement. They say he sold absolution to the devil, and when the bill came due, he paid in ways that made even the most hardened men look away. This is that story. This is the confession no one wanted written down. Before we continue with what happened to Father Bellini and why his death was too disturbing for the FBI to document, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Which city, which state? I'm curious to know who's brave enough to follow this story to the end. The Church of San Gennaro stands on the corner of Hester and Mulberry, 5 stories of soot-stained brick that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was built in 1897 by immigrants who carried the stone from the docks on their backs, men whose names are carved in the foundation, but whose grandsons now answer to different surnames, Americanized and laundered clean. The church smells of incense and mildew, of candle wax and something older, something that clings to the pews and the confessional booth like guilt that won't wash away. Father Carmine Bellini arrived at San Gennaro in the spring of 1946, sent by the Archdiocese without explanation and accepted by the parish without question. He was 48 years old, already graying, with the kind of face that seemed carved from the same stone as the saints in the alcoves, severe, knowing, impossible to read. He spoke little about where he came from. He celebrated Mass in Latin that rolled off his tongue like water, heard confessions 6 days a week, and kept the presbytery door locked even when he was inside. The neighborhood mothers loved him because he never judged. The neighborhood fathers respected him because he never asked questions he didn't want answered. The children feared him in the way children fear all priests, but they feared him more because of his eyes, dark and bottomless, the kind of eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone to the sin beneath. He was perfect for the neighborhood, too perfect. Mulberry Street in 1952 is a world unto itself, 8 blocks of tenements and storefronts, where everyone knows everyone else's business, but no one knows anything when the police come around. The air smells of garlic and fish, of bread baking in coal ovens and garbage rotting in the alleys. Women hang laundry from fire escapes, white sheets that never quite come clean in the city air. Men stand on corners in good suits despite the heat, hands in pockets, watching the street with eyes that catalogue every face, every car, every stranger who doesn't belong. The neighborhood lives by rules that are never written down. You don't talk to police. You don't testify in court. You pay your debts and you mind your business. You take care of your family first, your paesani second. And everyone else not at all. And when you've done something that weighs on your conscience, something that makes sleep difficult and makes you see faces in the dark, you go to confession. You kneel in the booth at San Gennaro and you tell Father Bellini what you've done, and he listens without interruption. And when you're finished, he assigns your penance and grants you absolution, and you walk out feeling clean, most of the time. There are 3 families that control the neighborhood, and they've controlled it since Prohibition made millionaires out of men who couldn't read. The Corellis own the docks and the trucks that move goods in and out of the city. The Vitales own the unions and the labor that loads those trucks. The Lombardis own everything else, the numbers rackets, the bookmaking, the social clubs where deals are made and disputes are settled. They exist in a state of permanent tension, 3 scorpions in a bottle, each one knowing that the moment one stings, they all die. Father Bellini knows them all by name. He baptized their children and married their daughters. He says prayers at their family dinners and blesses their businesses with holy water. And every Saturday, without fail, they come to confession. Carlo Corelli comes at 2 in the afternoon, always punctual, always alone. He kneels in the booth and speaks in a voice barely above a whisper. He confesses to pride, to lust, to anger. He never confesses to murder, but Father Bellini can hear it in the pauses between words, in the way Carlo's breathing changes when he talks about business. Vincent Vitale comes at 4, smelling of cigars and cologne. He confesses to gluttony, to greed, to taking the Lord's name in vain. He talks about his mistress in Bay Ridge, about the money he skims from the Union Pension Fund. He never mentions the 2 men who disappeared after they tried to organize a wildcat strike, but Father Bellini hears their names in the silence. Joseph Lombardi comes last, just before evening mass. He's the oldest of the 3, 64 years old, with white hair and the kind of quiet that comes from knowing you've already won every argument. He confesses to the same sins every week, pride, wrath, taking pleasure in another man's misfortune. His voice never changes. His penance is always the same. 10 Our Fathers, 10 Hail Marys, and 1 act of contrition. Father Bellini grants absolution to all of them. He speaks the Latin words that cleanse their souls, that wipe the slate clean for another week of sin. And when Saturday ends and the church empties and the votive candles burn down to nothing, he sits alone in the sacristy and drinks altar wine straight from the bottle, and he does not pray. Because Father Bellini knows something that no one else knows. He knows that confession is not about forgiveness. It's about power. And in a neighborhood where power is the only currency that matters, the man who hears the confessions is the richest man of all. The trouble begins in July, on a Tuesday that starts with heat and ends with blood. The temperature in the city climbs to 97 degrees. The asphalt on Mulberry Street turns soft. Children open fire hydrants and dance in the water while their mothers shout from windows. Men sit on stoops in undershirts, fanning themselves with newspapers, waiting for the sun to set and the temperature to drop below unbearable. Father Bellini spends the morning in his office, going through the parish books. The numbers don't add up, but they never do. Money comes in from collections and donations, goes out for repairs and utilities, and somewhere in between, a certain amount disappears. No one asks where it goes. No one wants to know. The church survives because the families support it. And they support it because they need a place to bring their guilt. At noon, there's a knock on the presbytery door. Father Bellini doesn't answer at first. He's learned to ignore interruptions, to let people stand outside until they give up and go away. But this knock is insistent, rhythmic. The kind of knock that says the person on the other side isn't leaving. He opens the door to find a boy of 17 or 18, thin as a rail, with dark eyes and a face that's seen too much too soon. The boy is sweating, but not from the heat. His hands are shaking. There's blood on his shirt collar. "I need confession," the boy says. His voice cracks on the word need. "Confession is Saturday," Father Bellini says. "Come back then." "I can't wait till Saturday." The boy's eyes dart to the street, checking to see if anyone followed him. "Please, Father, I need to confess now." Father Bellini hesitates. He's about to close the door, to tell the boy that the rules are the rules, but something in the boy's face stops him. Fear, yes, but something else too. Desperation, the kind that makes men do stupid things. "Come in," Father Bellini says. He leads the boy through the presbytery, down the narrow hallway that smells of old wood and older secrets, into the church itself. The afternoon light filters through the stained glass, painting everything in shades of red and blue. The pews are empty. The votive candles flicker. Father Bellini opens the door to the confessional booth and gestures for the boy to enter. The boy kneels. Father Bellini takes his seat on the other side of the screen. The wood is cool against his back. He can hear the boy breathing, fast and shallow. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." The boy's voice is barely audible. "It's been, I don't remember, a long time." "What do you wish to confess?" There's a long pause. Father Bellini can hear the traffic outside, the sound of a radio playing somewhere in the distance. He waits. He's good at waiting. "I killed someone," the boy says finally. Father Bellini's expression doesn't change. He's heard this confession before, in various forms, with various levels of remorse. "Tell me what happened." "His name was Tommy Greco. He was a runner for the Corellis. I was supposed to... They told me to teach him a lesson. He was skimming. Just a little bit, maybe $20 a week, but Mr. Corelli, he don't let things like that slide. So they gave me a bat and an address, and they said, you know, rough him up, Break his legs, maybe, make sure he understands. The boy's voice is shaking now, the words tumbling out faster and faster. But when I got there, Tommy, he tried to run. And I chased him into an alley and I hit him and he went down, but then he tried to get back up, so I hit him again. And again. And I didn't stop until he stopped moving. And when I looked down, there was blood everywhere. And his head was wrong, Father. I didn't mean to kill him. I swear to God, I just wanted to teach him a lesson. Where is the body? Still in the alley. I ran. I didn't know what to do, so I came here. Father Bellini closes his eyes. He can picture the scene, the narrow alley, the broken body, the pool of blood spreading across dirty concrete. He can picture the boy standing over it, the bat still in his hands, realizing what he's done. And he can picture what comes next. Who sent you? Father Bellini asks. I can't. Who sent you? Firmer this time. Carlo Corelli. It was Mr. Corelli. There it is, the name that matters. Father Bellini sits back, his mind already working through the implications. Carlo Corelli sent a boy to do a man's job, and now there's a body in an alley and the police will find it. And when they do, they'll start asking questions. And questions lead to answers. And answers lead to trials, and trials lead to prison, unless someone makes the body disappear. Listen to me carefully, Father Bellini says. His voice is calm, measured, the voice of a man who's solved problems like this before. You're going to go home. You're going to wash your hands and change your clothes and burn everything you were wearing. Then you're going to go to the social club on Elizabeth Street and tell Carlo Corelli what happened. Tell him the truth. Tell him you came to confession first. Do you understand? Yes, Father. And you're going to say nothing to anyone else. Not your mother, not your friends, not the police if they come asking, nothing. Do you understand? Yes, Father. Good. Father Bellini pauses. For your penance, say 3 Hail Marys and 1 act of contrition, and pray that God forgives you, because the men you work for won't. He speaks the words of absolution, the Latin rolling off his tongue automatically, without thought, without feeling. The boy mutters his thanks and stumbles out of the booth, his legs barely holding him up. Father Bellini listens to his footsteps echo through the empty church, hears the heavy door open and close. Then he sits alone in the confessional, in the dark, and he thinks about the boy's face. He thinks about Carlo Corelli, and he thinks about the body in the alley and who will find it first. He doesn't think about God. He stopped thinking about God a long time ago. That evening, Father Bellini walks to the social club on Elizabeth Street. It's a storefront with blacked-out windows and a door that's always locked, the kind of place that doesn't advertise what it is, because everyone already knows. He knocks twice, pauses, knocks once more. The door opens a crack and a face appears, young, suspicious, scarred across one cheek. Father, the face says, surprised, we're not open. I need to see Carlo. He's not seeing anyone tonight. He'll see me. The face disappears. Father Bellini waits on the sidewalk, watching the street. A group of old women pass by, speaking rapid Italian, their voices like birds. A car rolls past slowly, the driver checking addresses. The evening is cooling off, but the heat still rises from the pavement, shimmering. The door opens again. Come in. Inside, the social club smells of cigarette smoke and spilled beer. There are card tables in the back, pool tables along one wall, and a small bar where a man in a white shirt wipes down glasses that are already clean. Carlo Corelli sits at a table near the window, even though the window is covered. He's 42 years old, built like a boxer, with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than most men make in a month. He's not alone. 2 men sit with him, both younger, both watching Father Bellini with eyes that calculate distance and threat. Father, Carlo says. He doesn't stand. This is a surprise. We need to talk. Father Bellini glances at the 2 men. Alone. Carlo waves a hand, and the men leave without argument. Father Bellini sits down across from Carlo uninvited. The chair creaks under his weight. You sent a boy to do your work, Father Bellini says. Carlo's expression doesn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. His name is... Father Bellini pauses. He realizes he never asked the boy's name. It doesn't matter. He came to confession this afternoon. He told me about Tommy Greco. He told me about the alley. Did he? Carlo's voice is flat. "The police will find the body. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. When they do, they'll start asking questions. And that boy, he's scared. Scared people talk. The boy won't talk. How do you know? Because if he talks, his mother loses her apartment. His sister loses her job. His little brother has an accident on the way home from school." Carlo lights a cigarette, his movements slow and deliberate. He knows this. Everyone knows this. So no, Father. The boy won't talk. Father Bellini watches the smoke curl toward the ceiling. And the body? What body? Carlo smiles, but there's no warmth in it. Tommy Greco left town, took some money that didn't belong to him and disappeared. People do that sometimes. The neighborhood understands. The police won't understand. The police understand what they're told to understand. Carlo leans forward, his smile fading. "You're a smart man, Father. You've been here long enough to know how things work. So why are you asking questions you already know the answers to?" "Because a boy confessed murder to me today, and I gave him absolution without penance. And now I'm sitting here talking to the man who sent him to kill, and I'm wondering when this stops being about forgiveness and starts being about complicity." The silence that follows is thick and heavy. Carlo studies Father Bellini's face, looking for something. Doubt, fear, weakness. He doesn't find it. "You've been hearing confessions for 6 years, Carlo says finally. 6 years of listening to this neighborhood pour out its sins. You think this is the first time you've heard about murder. You think this is the first time you've granted absolution to a killer." He taps ash into a tray. "The difference, Father, is that now you're asking questions, and questions are dangerous. I'm a priest. Questions are my job. Your job is to listen and forgive, that's all. You don't investigate, you don't interfere, you don't come to my club and tell me how to run my business." Carlo's voice hardens. "You want to be a priest? Be a priest. Say your prayers, drink your wine, pretend you're saving souls. But don't pretend you're better than the rest of us. You stopped being better the first time you absolved a sin you knew wouldn't be repented." Father Bellini stands. He said what he came to say, and staying longer serves no purpose. "The boy will be back next Saturday," he says, "and the Saturday after that, and eventually he'll confess something worse. They always do. Then you'll forgive him," Carlo says, "because that's what you do. It's what you've always done." Father Bellini walks out of the social club into the night air. The street is quieter now, most people inside for dinner, the sounds of family life filtering through open windows, voices, laughter, the clatter of dishes. He walks back to San Gennaro slowly, his hands in his pockets, his mind turning over Carlo's words. "You stopped being better the first time you absolved a sin you knew wouldn't be repented." He wants to argue with that. He wants to believe there's a difference between hearing a confession and becoming part of the crime. But deep down, in a place he tries not to examine too closely, he knows Carlo is right. He's been complicit for 6 years. He's been taking their confessions and granting their absolution and telling himself it's God's work, when really it's just business. Another transaction in a neighborhood built on transactions. He reaches the church and unlocks the door. Inside, the votive candles have burned out. The darkness is complete. He doesn't turn on the lights. He walks to the altar, kneels before the crucifix, and tries to pray. But the words won't come. They haven't come in years. Above him, Christ hangs on the cross, arms outstretched, face twisted in agony. Father Bellini stares up at that face and wonders if Christ ever heard confessions, if he ever sat in the dark and listened to men describe the evil they'd done and granted them forgiveness, and then went home and drank until he couldn't remember their names. Probably not. Christ had the luxury of dying young. The body of Tommy Greco is found 3 days later in the East River, weighted down with concrete blocks that weren't heavy enough. The police fish him out on a Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon the story is in all the papers. Young man, 23 years old, beaten to death, dumped in the river. The police say they're investigating. They say they're looking for leads. They say they'll find who did this. Everyone knows they won't. Father Bellini reads about it in the Daily News while eating breakfast in the presbytery kitchen. The article is short, only 4 paragraphs, buried on page 7 between an advertisement for refrigerators and a story about a city council meeting. Tommy Greco's name is misspelled. His age is wrong. The article doesn't mention that he worked for the Corellis, or that he was killed for stealing, or that his death was meant to send a message. It just says he was found in the river, and the police are investigating, and anyone with information should contact the department. Father Bellini folds the newspaper and drinks his coffee. It's weak, the way he likes it, barely more than water with a memory of beans. Outside, the morning is already hot. The forecast says it will reach 95 degrees by afternoon. Another scorcher, another day of people seeking relief in the church, sitting in the pews where it's cool, pretending to pray while really just escaping the heat. At 10 o'clock, there's a knock on the presbytery door. Father Bellini knows who it is before he opens it. Detective Frank Sullivan stands on the stoop, hat in hand, sweating through his shirt. He's 45 years old, Irish, with the kind of face that's seen every crime the city has to offer and stopped being surprised 20 years ago. "Father," Sullivan says. "Got a minute?" "Of course." Father Bellini steps aside. "Come in." They sit in the parlor, a small room with 2 chairs and a table and a window that looks out onto the street. Father Bellini offers coffee. Sullivan accepts. They sit in silence while the coffee brews, listening to the percolator burble and hiss. "You've heard about Tommy Greco," Sullivan says finally. "I read about it this morning. Terrible." "Yeah, terrible." Sullivan accepts the coffee, drinks it black. "Thing is, Father, we're having trouble finding anyone who knows anything. Tommy lived 4 blocks from here. He grew up in this neighborhood. And nobody saw nothing, nobody heard nothing, nobody knows nothing. Perhaps no one does know anything. Perhaps," Sullivan sets down his cup, "or perhaps people are too scared to talk. That happens a lot around here. Fear is a powerful motivator. So is guilt." Sullivan leans forward. "You hear confessions, right? 6 days a week." Father Bellini feels something cold settle in his stomach. "I do. And people tell you things, private things, things they wouldn't tell anyone else. Confession is a sacrament. What's said in the confessional is between the penitent and God. I know that. I grew up Catholic, went to confession every Saturday until I was old enough to realize it was all bullshit." Sullivan's voice is flat, matter of fact. "But here's the thing, Father. Tommy Greco was beaten to death with a blunt object, probably a bat or a pipe. He was hit at least 8 times. That's not a professional job. That's someone who panicked, someone young and stupid and scared. And if someone young and stupid and scared did this, they might have gone looking for forgiveness. They might have gone to confession. Even if they had, I couldn't tell you. Can't or won't. Both." Sullivan sits back, his jaw tight. "You know what I think? I think someone in this neighborhood knows exactly who killed Tommy Greco. And I think that someone is protecting them, maybe out of fear, maybe out of loyalty, maybe because they're getting paid to keep their mouth shut. But someone knows. And until someone talks, Tommy Greco's mother is going to keep wondering why her son ended up in the river. She's going to keep asking me questions I can't answer. She's going to keep crying herself to sleep. And I'm going to keep knocking on doors, getting nowhere, while the people who did this go on living their lives like nothing happened." Father Bellini says nothing. There's nothing to say. Sullivan is right, of course. Someone knows, multiple people know. The whole neighborhood probably knows by now. But no one will talk because talking means betraying the code, and betraying the code means exile or worse. Sullivan stands, putting his hat back on. "You're a good man, Father. I believe that. But you're in a bad position. You're trying to serve God in a neighborhood that serves something else, and sooner or later you're going to have to choose which one matters more. I've made my choice. Have you?" Sullivan looks at him with something like pity. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to serve both, and a man can't serve 2 masters. Somebody said that once. Might have been Jesus." After Sullivan leaves, Father Bellini sits alone in the parlor, staring at the wall. The coffee has gone cold. The morning light slants through the window, illuminating dust motes that hang suspended in the air. He thinks about Tommy Greco's mother, whoever she is, wherever she is, mourning a son who won't get justice. He thinks about the boy who killed him, who confessed and received absolution, and is now walking around free. He thinks about Carlo Corelli, who ordered the killing and will face no consequences. And he thinks about himself, about the choice he made 6 years ago when he accepted this position, when he decided that hearing the confessions of criminals was part of God's work. About all the confessions he's heard since then, all the sins he's absolved, all the crimes he's kept secret in the name of sacred duty. Sullivan was right about one thing. A man can't serve two masters. The question is, which master has Father Bellini been serving? He's afraid he already knows the answer. Saturday arrives, and with it confession. Father Bellini takes his place in the booth at 2 o'clock, as he does every week. The air inside is stifling, the wood absorbing and holding heat like a stone. He sits and waits, his hands folded in his lap, his mind deliberately blank. Carlo Corelli arrives at 2:15. He's late, which is unusual. Father Bellini hears him enter the booth, hears the rustle of his suit as he kneels, hears the breath he takes before speaking. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 1 week since my last confession. What do you wish to confess?" Pride. A pause. Wrath. Taking pleasure in another man's misfortune. The same sins as always, the same empty ritual. Father Bellini waits for more, but there is no more. Carlo is not going to confess to ordering Tommy Greco's death. He's not going to acknowledge it at all. "Is there anything else?" Father Bellini asks. "No, Father." "Then for your penance." "Actually," Carlo interrupts, "there is something I wanted to ask you." Father Bellini goes still. In 6 years, Carlo has never asked him anything outside the prescribed ritual. "What is it?" "That detective who came to see you, Sullivan. What did he want?" "He wanted to know if anyone had confessed to killing Tommy Greco." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that confession is sacred, that I can't reveal what's said in the confessional." "Good." There's a note of satisfaction in Carlo's voice. "That's good, Father. That's the right answer. Because if you had told him something else, if you had broken that seal, well, that would have been very disappointing for both of us." The threat is subtle but unmistakable. Father Bellini feels it settle over him like a shroud. "Are you threatening me, Carlo?" "I'm reminding you of your duty. You're a priest. You take confessions. You grant absolution. That's the deal. That's how this works. And as long as you keep your end of the deal, everything is fine. The church gets its donations. The neighborhood stays peaceful. Everyone's happy. And if I don't keep my end," Carlo's laugh is soft, almost gentle, "then you're not keeping your end. And deals have consequences, Father. You know that. You've lived here long enough." Father Bellini sits in the darkness, his heart pounding, his mouth dry. He wants to say something, to push back, to assert his authority as a priest, as a man of God. But the words stick in his throat. Because he knows Carlo is right. He's been complicit for 6 years. He's been part of the system, taking their confessions and keeping their secrets and telling himself it's God's will when really, it's just self-preservation. "For your penance," Father Bellini says quietly, "say 10 Our Fathers, 10 Hail Marys, and 1 act of contrition, and may God forgive you for the sins you haven't confessed." Carlo laughs again, and the sound makes Father Bellini's skin crawl. "You're a funny man, Father. I'll see you next week." He leaves the booth. Father Bellini sits alone, his hands trembling. He hears the church door open and close. He hears the traffic outside, the voices of children playing, the normal sounds of life continuing as if nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Carlo has made the terms explicit. Father Bellini is not a priest anymore. He's an employee, a tool, a weapon used by the families to maintain control, to keep the neighborhood in line, to ensure that guilt can be confessed and absolved and forgotten without consequence. At 4 o'clock, Vincent Vitale arrives for his confession. He confesses to the usual sins: gluttony, greed, adultery. He mentions his mistress in passing, laughs about the money he took from the pension fund. He's jovial, relaxed, treating the confessional like a therapy session. Father Bellini grants him absolution mechanically, without thought, without feeling. At 5:30, Joseph Lombardi arrives. He's the last, as always. His confession is brief, businesslike. Pride, wrath, schadenfreude. The same sins every week, like a script he's memorized. Father Bellini absolves him, and Lombardi leaves without another word. When the confessional is finally empty, Father Bellini sits in the darkness and tries to remember why he became a priest. He was 19 years old, the youngest of 6 children, with no prospects and no future. The priesthood seemed like an escape, from poverty, from expectation, from the weight of a life that promised nothing but hard work and early death. He went to seminary, learned the Latin, studied the theology, took his vows. He believed then. He believed that God was real and that sin could be forgiven and that the work he was doing mattered. When did that change? When did belief become performance? When did God become a concept instead of a presence? He can't pinpoint the moment. It happened gradually, over years, like rust spreading across iron. Small compromises, small allowances, small sins that added up to something larger, something darker, something that looked like faith but felt like emptiness. He thinks about Detective Sullivan's words, "A man can't serve two masters." He thinks about Carlo's threat, "Deals have consequences." He thinks about the boy who confessed to murder, who walked out of the church forgiven, who will go on to confess worse things in the weeks and months and years to come. And he thinks about Tommy Greco lying in a morgue somewhere, his mother crying, his killer unpunished. Father Bellini stands and leaves the confessional. He walks through the empty church, past the pews and the altar and the crucifix where Christ hangs in eternal agony. He goes to the sacristy, pours himself a glass of wine, and drinks it in one long swallow. Then another. Then another. By the time he stumbles back to the presbytery, it's dark outside. The street is quiet. The neighborhood is settling in for the night. Families eating dinner, children being put to bed, men counting money behind closed doors. Tomorrow is Sunday. Tomorrow there will be Mass. Tomorrow he will stand before the congregation and speak the words of the gospel and raise the Eucharist and call down the body of Christ. Tomorrow he will pretend that any of it matters. The summer grinds on, hot and heavy and suffocating. August arrives like a punishment, the temperature never dropping below 80 even at night. People sleep on fire escapes, on rooftops, anywhere they can catch a breeze. The church becomes a refuge, its thick walls keeping out the worst of the heat, its cool air drawing people in like moths to flame. Father Bellini goes through the motions. Mass on Sunday, confessions on Saturday, baptisms, weddings, funerals in between. He speaks the words he's spoken 1,000 times before, performs the rituals with precision and no passion. The congregation doesn't notice. They never do. As long as the priest shows up and says the right words, that's enough. But something is shifting inside him, a pressure building like water behind a dam. He feels it when he hears confessions, when men come to him and describe their sins in detail, seeking absolution they don't deserve. He feels it when Carlo Corelli smiles at him on the street, a smile that says, "We both know what you are." He feels it when he lies awake at night staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, laughter, shouting, the occasional scream quickly silenced. He feels it most acutely when he celebrates Mass, when he stands at the altar and raises the host and speaks the words of transubstantiation. "This is my body. This is my blood." Words that are supposed to transform bread and wine into something sacred, something holy. But when Father Bellini says them, he feels nothing. The host is just bread. The wine is just wine. God is not present. God has not been present for a long time. In early August, a new family moves into the neighborhood. They take an apartment above a grocery store on Mott Street, a young couple with a baby daughter. The husband works on the docks. The wife stays home with the child. They come to Mass on Sunday, sit in the back, leave quickly when it's over. They're trying to fit in, to become part of the neighborhood, but they're outsiders, and the neighborhood can smell it on them. Father Bellini meets them after Mass one Sunday. The husband's name is Michael, the wife is Angela, the baby is named Rosa. Michael has the hands of a laborer, rough and scarred. Angela has the eyes of someone who's seen hardship and expects more. The baby is beautiful, with dark hair and a serious expression, as if she already knows the world is not kind. "Welcome to San Gennaro," Father Bellini says, shaking Michael's hand. "If you need anything, you know where to find me." "Thank you, Father," Michael says. His voice is careful, measured. "We're glad to be here. It seems like a good neighborhood." It is. The lie comes easily. A very good neighborhood. But even as he says it, Father Bellini sees the doubt in Michael's eyes. The man is not stupid. He's noticed the way people watch him, the way conversations stop when he approaches, the way doors close when he knocks. He knows something is wrong, even if he can't articulate what. 2 weeks later, Michael comes to confession. It's a Tuesday afternoon, the church nearly empty, the heat so oppressive that even breathing feels like work. Father Bellini is in his office when he hears the knock on the confessional door, the hesitant, uncertain knock of someone who's not sure they belong. He takes his place in the booth. Michael kneels on the other side of the screen, his breathing audible in the small space. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a long time, years maybe. What do you wish to confess?" "I don't know." Michael's voice is strained. "I don't know if this counts as a sin, but I don't know who else to talk to. Tell me what's troubling you." "It's the neighborhood, the people here. I thought when we moved in, I thought it would be like the old neighborhood, you know? People helping each other, looking out for each other. But it's not like that. It's like everyone's scared or hiding something. I ask a simple question and people look at me like I'm crazy. I try to make friends and they walk away, and the men I work with on the docks, they won't even eat lunch with me. They say I'm not one of them, but I don't understand what that means. I'm Italian, same as them. I'm Catholic, I work hard. What more do they want?" Father Bellini listens to the fear in Michael's voice, the confusion, the dawning realization that he's moved his family into a place where they're not welcome. He wants to tell Michael the truth. He wants to explain how the neighborhood works, who really runs it, what happens to people who ask too many questions. But doing so would break the seal of confession and mark Michael as a man who can't be trusted. So instead he says, "Give it time. People here are slow to accept outsiders, but if you keep your head down and do your work, eventually they'll come around." "Keep my head down." Michael laughs bitterly. "That's what everyone says. Keep your head down. Mind your business. Don't ask questions." "But Father, I've got a wife and a baby. I need to know they're safe, and I don't feel safe here. I feel like we're surrounded by wolves." "You are safe," Father Bellini says, and even as he speaks, he knows it's a lie. "The neighborhood takes care of its own." "But we're not its own. That's what you're saying, isn't it? We're outsiders, and outsiders aren't safe." Father Bellini says nothing. There's nothing he can say that won't make things worse. Michael stands abruptly. "Thank you for your time, Father." He leaves the confessional, and Father Bellini sits in the darkness, his heart heavy with guilt. He's just told a man that his family is safe when they're not. He's just lied to someone seeking guidance, seeking help, seeking the truth. And he did it to protect himself, to avoid making waves, to keep the peace with the families who run the neighborhood. He thinks about Michael's wife, Angela. He thinks about their daughter, Rosa. He thinks about what will happen if Michael keeps asking questions, keeps pushing, keeps trying to understand why the neighborhood treats him like a threat. Nothing good at all. September arrives, and with it, a brief reprieve from the heat. The temperature drops into the 70s. People emerge from their apartments like prisoners released from cells, filling the streets, talking and laughing and living again. The neighborhood feels different, lighter, as if a weight has been lifted. But the lightness is an illusion. Beneath the surface, tensions are rising. The three families are at war, not openly, but in small, quiet ways. Shipments go missing. Trucks are hijacked. Men disappear without explanation. No one talks about it, but everyone knows. The fragile peace that has held for years is starting to crack. Father Bellini hears about it in confession. Carlo Corelli confesses to wrath, to wanting revenge against someone who wronged him. Vincent Vitale confesses to fear, to lying awake at night worrying about his safety. Joseph Lombardi confesses to nothing at all, which is the most troubling confession of all, because Joseph is the kind of man who only stays silent when he's planning something. In mid-September, there's a meeting at the social club on Elizabeth Street. Father Bellini doesn't attend, he's not invited, but he hears about it afterward from the whispers on the street. The three families sat down together, smoked cigars, drank whiskey, and pretended to negotiate peace while really just staking out their positions. Nothing was resolved. Nothing was agreed upon. They left the meeting more divided than when they arrived. 2 days later, Vincent Vitale is shot. It happens at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night as he's walking from his car to his front door. 2 men with masks and guns step out of the shadows, fire 4 shots, and disappear into the night. Vincent survives, 1 bullet to the shoulder, 1 grazing his ribs, but the message is clear. The truce is over. The war has begun. The police investigate, but they don't investigate too hard. Detective Sullivan comes by the church again, asks Father Bellini if he's heard anything, if anyone's confessed to attempted murder. Father Bellini says no, which is the truth. Whoever shot Vincent Vitale has not come to confession, not yet. But they will. Sooner or later the guilt will eat at them, and they'll seek absolution. And when they do, Father Bellini will be there listening in the darkness, granting forgiveness for sins that should never be forgiven. The shooting changes everything. The neighborhood goes quiet, tense, everyone waiting for the next move. Men who used to stand on corners now stay inside. Mothers keep their children close. The social clubs close early, the doors locked, the windows dark. Even the church feels different, as if the prayers are being spoken more urgently, as if people are suddenly remembering that God exists and might actually be listening. Michael and his family are the first to leave. One day they're there, the next day the apartment above the grocery store is empty. No explanation, no goodbye. Father Bellini walks past their building and sees the landlord sweeping the stoop, and he asks what happened. "They left," the landlord says, not looking up. "Said they didn't like the neighborhood." "Did they say where they were going?" "Why would they tell me? I'm just the landlord." He keeps sweeping. "Good riddance anyway, they weren't from here, didn't belong." Father Bellini walks away, feeling something like relief. Michael and his family are safe. They got out before things got worse. It's a small victory, but in a neighborhood with so few victories, small ones matter. That Saturday, confessions are sparse. Only a handful of people come, and most of them confess to minor sins, pride, envy, taking the Lord's name in vain. The usual litany of human weakness. Carlo Corelli doesn't come at all, which is unusual. Neither does Vincent Vitale, which is understandable given that he's recovering from gunshot wounds. Joseph Lombardi arrives last, as always, but his confession is different, shorter, more careful. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 1 week since my last confession." "What do you wish to confess?" "I've been thinking about death." Joseph's voice is quiet, almost meditative, about what happens when we die, whether there's really a God waiting to judge us, or if it's all just stories we tell ourselves to feel better about the darkness. Father Bellini goes still. In all the years Joseph has been coming to confession, he's never said anything like this. "Do you doubt your faith?" "I doubt everything, Father. Faith, loyalty, family, all of it. I look around this neighborhood and I see men who've spent their whole lives building empires out of blood and fear. And for what? So they can die and pass it on to sons who'll destroy it in a generation? So they can lie awake at night wondering who's going to kill them? There's no point to any of it. Hey, it's all just vanity and death. Then why do you continue? Because what else is there?" Joseph laughs, a sound without humor. "We're all trapped, Father. You, me, everyone in this neighborhood. We're trapped by the choices we made years ago, and now we're just living out the consequences. You can pretend you're serving God, and I can pretend I'm building something that matters, but in the end we're both just waiting to die." Father Bellini doesn't know what to say. Joseph is speaking the truth, the ugly truth that neither of them has been willing to acknowledge until now. They're both complicit, they're both trapped, and there's no way out except death. "Do you repent?" Father Bellini asks finally. "No," Joseph says. "I don't. Because repentance requires believing that I did something wrong, and I'm not sure I did. I played the hand I was dealt. I made the choices that made sense at the time. If God wants to judge me for that, fine. But I won't apologize for surviving." "Then I can't grant you absolution. I didn't ask for it." Joseph stands. "I just wanted you to know that I see you, Father. I see what you are, and I'm not fooled anymore." He leaves the confessional. Father Bellini sits in the darkness, his heart pounding. Joseph's words echo in his mind, each one a nail driven into his conscience. "I see what you are. I'm not fooled anymore." He wants to believe that Joseph is wrong, that he's still a priest, still a man of God, still someone who serves a higher purpose, but he can't. The illusion has been shattered. He is what Joseph said he is, a man trapped by his own choices, complicit in the sins he absolves, serving not God, but the very evil he's supposed to fight against. That night, Father Bellini drinks himself unconscious. He wakes the next morning on the floor of the presbytery, his head pounding, his mouth dry, the taste of bile and regret on his tongue. He drags himself to the bathroom, vomits, washes his face, looks at himself in the mirror. The man staring back at him is a stranger, grey-haired, hollow-eyed, wearing the black shirt and white collar of a priest, but looking like something else entirely. A ghost, a shell. A man who sold his soul so gradually that he didn't even notice it was gone. He goes to the church and celebrates morning mass. The congregation is small, a handful of old women, a few men who work night shifts and have nowhere else to be. Father Bellini goes through the motions, speaks the words, raises the host, grants the blessing. When it's over, he stands at the door and shakes hands, smiles, tells people he'll see them next week. But he knows he won't, because something inside him has broken, and he doesn't know how to fix it. October comes, and with it, the first hints of winter. The leaves turn brown and fall from the few trees that line the streets. The air grows cold, sharp, carrying the smell of smoke from chimneys. The neighborhood hunkers down, preparing for the months ahead, when the streets will be empty and the windows frosted, and survival will depend on staying warm and staying quiet. The war between the families continues, but it's moved underground. No more shootings, no more open confrontations. Instead, there are disappearances. A man who worked for the Corellis vanishes on his way home from the docks. A bookkeeper for the Vitales is found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide, even though the bullet entered from the wrong angle. A truck full of whiskey meant for the Lombardis is hijacked and never seen again. The police know what's happening, but they can't prove anything. Detective Sullivan comes by the church more often now, ostensibly to check in, to see if Father Bellini is all right, but really to fish for information. He never asks directly. He just sits in the parlor, drinks coffee, talks about the weather, and waits for Father Bellini to slip up, to reveal something he shouldn't know. But Father Bellini is careful. He says nothing. He gives Sullivan nothing. Because even now, even after everything, he's still bound by the seal of confession. It's the last thread connecting him to his priesthood, the last rule he hasn't broken. In late October, Carlo Corelli comes to confession for the first time in over a month. He arrives late after everyone else has gone, and his footsteps echo through the empty church. He enters the booth and kneels, and Father Bellini can smell whiskey on his breath. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a while since my last confession. What do you wish to confess?" "I've done things." Carlo's voice is slurred, tired. "Bad things. Things I can't take back. And I'm starting to think maybe I don't want to. Maybe I like being this way. Maybe it's easier than trying to be good. Everyone can be redeemed. Can they?" Carlo laughs. "Even you, Father? Because from where I'm sitting, you're just as dirty as the rest of us. You've been covering up crimes for 6 years. You've been helping us get away with murder, extortion, theft. You've been our accomplice, our partner, our priest. So tell me, Father, how do you redeem yourself?" Father Bellini says nothing. There's nothing to say. Carlo is right. "I used to think you were weak," Carlo continues. "I used to think you were just some priest who was too scared to stand up to us. But I was wrong. You're not weak, you're smart. You saw an opportunity and you took it. You made yourself indispensable. You became the one person in this neighborhood who could give us what we needed. Forgiveness without consequence, and in return we protected you, funded your church, made sure no one touched you. It's a good deal, Father. A really good deal. If you're here to confess, confess. If not, leave. I'm here to warn you." Carlo's voice hardens. "Things are changing. The families are tearing each other apart, and when the dust settles, there's going to be a reckoning. People who were protected before won't be protected anymore. Deals that were made will be broken. And you, Father, you're going to have to choose a side, because neutrality is about to become very dangerous. I don't take sides. You already have. You just don't realize it yet." Carlo stands. "Think about what I said, and think about what you're going to do when someone comes to you and confesses to something so terrible that even you can't forgive it." He leaves the confessional. Father Bellini sits in the darkness, Carlo's words ringing in his ears. Think about what you're going to do when someone confesses something so terrible that even you can't forgive it. The problem is, Father Bellini doesn't know. He doesn't know where his line is, if he even has one anymore. He's absolved murderers, thieves, extortionists. He's granted forgiveness to men who have no intention of repenting, who will go out and commit the same sins again and again. What could possibly be so terrible that he can't forgive it? He's afraid he's about to find out. November brings the first snow, a light dusting that melts by morning but leaves the streets slick and treacherous. The neighborhood seems to shrink, people staying indoors, the social clubs closing early, the church attendance dropping off. It's as if everyone is waiting for something, holding their breath, bracing for impact. On a Tuesday afternoon, the thing everyone's been waiting for finally happens. There's an explosion at a warehouse on the waterfront, a building owned by the Corellis. The blast is so powerful it shatters windows 3 blocks away. By the time the fire department arrives, the building is fully engulfed, flames shooting 50 feet into the air, black smoke billowing across the river. 3 men die in the fire. Their names are in the newspapers the next day, along with speculation about the cause. The official story is that it was an accident, a gas leak, faulty wiring, but everyone knows the truth. It was a bomb. It was retaliation. It was the Lombardis sending a message. Carlo Corelli is not one of the dead, but the deaths hit him hard. One of the men was his cousin. Another was his best friend from childhood. The third was a kid, barely 20, with a wife and a baby on the way. Carlo attends all 3 funerals, standing at the back of the church in a black suit, his face carved from stone, his eyes burning with rage and grief. Father Bellini conducts the services. He speaks the prayers, blesses the coffins, offers comfort to the families. But the words feel hollow, meaningless. These men died in a war that Father Bellini has enabled, a war that he's helped perpetuate by granting absolution to the men who wage it. He's complicit in their deaths, just as he's complicit in every death that's come before. After the 3rd funeral, Carlo approaches Father Bellini in the sacristy. His eyes are red, either from tears or from lack of sleep. His hands are shaking. "I need to talk to you," Carlo says. His voice is hoarse. "About what?" "About confession. I need to confess something, but not here, not in the church, somewhere private." Father Bellini hesitates. Meeting outside the church violates protocol, breaks the boundaries that have kept them both safe for years. But Carlo is not asking. He's demanding. And Father Bellini can see in his eyes that refusing is not an option. "Where?" Father Bellini asks. "The old meat locker, on Baxter Street, midnight tonight. Come alone." "Carlo." "Midnight, Father. Don't be late." He leaves before Father Bellini can argue. Father Bellini stands in the sacristy, his heart racing, his mind spinning. This is a trap. It has to be a trap. Carlo is going to kill him or worse. But what choice does he have? If he doesn't go, he's marked as untrustworthy. And in this neighborhood, being untrustworthy is a death sentence. That night, Father Bellini walks through the cold, dark streets to Baxter Street. The old meat locker is a relic from Prohibition, a basement space where bootleggers used to store illegal liquor. It's been abandoned for years, the door padlocked, the windows boarded up. But when Father Bellini arrives, the padlock is open, the door slightly ajar. He steps inside. The air is frigid, smelling of old blood and rot. A single bulb hangs from the ceiling, casting sickly yellow light across the concrete floor. Carlo Corelli stands in the center of the room, smoking a cigarette, his breath visible in the cold air. "You came," Carlo says. He sounds surprised. "You asked me to." "I thought you might run. I thought you might go to the police, tell them everything, try to save yourself." Carlo takes a drag on his cigarette. "But you didn't. You came. That says something about you, Father. I'm just not sure what." "What do you want to confess?" "I'm going to kill Joseph Lombardi." Carlo says it flatly, without emotion. "Tomorrow night. I'm going to walk into his house, put a gun to his head, and pull the trigger. And I'm telling you this now so you know, so you can absolve me before I do it." Father Bellini feels his stomach drop. "Carlo, no." Carlo cuts him off. "You don't get to talk me out of it. You don't get to tell me there's another way. Joseph killed my cousin. He killed my friend. He killed that kid who never hurt anyone. And he's not going to stop. He's going to keep killing my people until there's no one left. So I'm going to kill him first. And I need you to absolve me for it. I can't absolve you for a sin you haven't committed yet. Then I'll come back after. I'll confess again. But I need to know right now, Father. When I come back, are you going to grant me absolution? Or are you going to finally grow a spine and refuse? Father Bellini stares at Carlo, at the desperation in his eyes, at the grief and rage and exhaustion. He realizes that Carlo is not looking for forgiveness. He's looking for permission. He's looking for a priest to tell him that what he's about to do is justified, that God will understand, that killing Joseph Lombardi is not a sin, but an act of justice. And Father Bellini knows that if he grants that permission, if he absolves Carlo for this murder, he will have crossed a line from which there is no return. He will no longer be a priest who hears confessions. He will be an accomplice to murder, a partner in crime, a criminal in a collar. But if he refuses, Carlo will kill him. Right here, right now, in this cold basement that smells of death. Father Bellini closes his eyes. He thinks about all the confessions he's heard, all the sins he's absolved, all the compromises he's made. He thinks about the boy who killed Tommy Greco, about Michael and his family who fled the neighborhood, about Detective Sullivan and his questions that can never be answered. He thinks about God, and whether God is watching this moment, and whether God cares. He opens his eyes and looks at Carlo. I will not absolve you for this. Not before, not after. If you kill Joseph Lombardi, you do it on your own soul, and when you die, you face God alone. Carlo's face hardens. He drops his cigarette and grinds it under his heel. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then he nods, slowly, as if acknowledging a decision that was always going to be made. Okay, Father, he says quietly. Okay. He walks past Father Bellini, toward the door. Father Bellini hears his footsteps on the stairs, hears the door open and close, then silence. Father Bellini stands alone in the cold basement, his body shaking, his mind reeling. He's just signed his own death warrant. Carlo will kill Joseph Lombardi, and then Carlo will kill him. It's inevitable. It's the price of finally saying no. But as he walks back through the dark streets to San Gennaro, Father Bellini feels something he hasn't felt in years. Not peace, exactly, not redemption, but something close, something like dignity. He's made a choice, and for the first time in 6 years, it's the right choice. It might cost him his life, but at least finally it's his choice to make. The next day, Father Bellini goes about his duties as if nothing has changed. He celebrates morning mass, visits a sick parishioner in the hospital, prepares for evening vespers. The day is cold and clear, the sky a pale blue, the streets busy with people going about their lives, unaware that a murder is being planned, that their neighborhood is about to tip from tension into chaos. At 4 o'clock, Detective Sullivan arrives at the church. He looks tired, older than his 45 years, with dark circles under his eyes and a weariness that seems to seep from his bones. Father Bellini meets him in the parlor, offers coffee, which Sullivan declines. I'm going to ask you something, Sullivan says without preamble, and I want you to answer honestly. Can you do that? I always answer honestly. No, you don't. You answer carefully. You answer in ways that protect yourself and the people you serve. But I'm asking you now, as one man to another, not as a cop to a priest. Are people going to die tonight? Father Bellini meets Sullivan's eyes. He sees the plea there, the desperation of a man who spent his career fighting a war he can't win, trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Yes, Father Bellini says, I think they are. Who? I can't tell you that. Can't or won't? Both. Sullivan stands abruptly, his frustration boiling over. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand that your silence is killing people? That every time you refuse to answer, every time you hide behind the seal of confession, you're helping these men get away with murder? I understand. Then why? Why protect them? What do they give you that's worth the lives of the people they kill? Father Bellini has no answer, or rather, he has an answer, but it's one that Sullivan won't accept. Because the truth is that Father Bellini doesn't protect the families out of loyalty or fear. He protects them because it's easier than standing against them, because he spent 6 years building his life around their confessions, and dismantling that life would mean admitting that he's wasted those years, that he's failed as a priest, that he's betrayed everything he once believed in. "I'm sorry," Father Bellini says. "I can't help you." Sullivan looks at him with something like pity. "You know what the saddest part is, Father. You still think you're one of the good guys. You still think that by keeping their secrets, you're serving God. But you're not. You're serving them. And when this is all over, when the bodies are counted and the blood is cleaned up, you're going to have to live with that, and I don't envy you." He leaves. Father Bellini sits alone in the parlor, Sullivan's words echoing in his mind. "You still think you're one of the good guys, is that true? Does he still think that?" He's not sure anymore. He's not sure of anything except that tonight, Carlo Corelli is going to kill Joseph Lombardi, and Father Bellini is powerless to stop it. Or rather, he has the power. He could call Sullivan, tell him everything, give him the names and the time and the place, but doing so would break the seal of confession, would violate the sacred trust. That's the foundation of his priesthood. Except he's already broken that trust. He's already violated that seal by becoming complicit in the crimes he absolves. The line he's trying not to cross doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't existed for years. That evening, Father Bellini sits in his office and waits. He doesn't know what he's waiting for. A phone call, a knock on the door, a gunshot in the distance. He just waits. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, each second feeling like an eternity. Outside, the sun sets and the neighborhood grows dark. At 9 o'clock, the phone rings. Father Bellini answers. There's silence on the other end. Then a voice he doesn't recognize. "Father Bellini?" "Yes." "This is Angela, Michael's wife. You remember me?" "Of course. How are you?" "We're fine. We're in New Jersey now, living with my sister. It's better here. Safer." She pauses. "I wanted to call and thank you for being kind to us, for not judging us when we left." "You don't need to thank me." "I do. Because you're the only person in that neighborhood who treated us like human beings. Everyone else, they looked at us like we were invaders, like we didn't belong. But you were different, and I wanted you to know that it mattered." Father Bellini feels something break inside him. A small kindness, barely remembered, suddenly transformed into something significant. Proof that he's not completely lost, that there's still some fragment of goodness left in him. "Thank you for calling," he says, his voice thick. "Take care of yourself, Father. And if you ever need to leave that place, remember, there are other neighborhoods, better neighborhoods. You don't have to stay." She hangs up. Father Bellini sits with the phone in his hand, Angela's words replaying in his mind. You don't have to stay. But he does, because leaving would mean abandoning the people who still come to him for confession, who still believe he can grant them absolution, who still need a priest, even if that priest is broken. And besides, where would he go? What church would accept a priest who's been complicit in organized crime for 6 years? What congregation would want him? At 10 o'clock he hears sirens. They're distant at first, then closer, then very close. He walks to the window and looks out onto the street. Police cars are racing past, lights flashing, heading toward the waterfront. His heart sinks. It's happened. Carlo has killed Joseph Lombardi, and now the police are responding, and the neighborhood is about to explode. But then he hears more sirens coming from a different direction, and more and more. There are at least a dozen police cars, maybe more, all converging on the neighborhood. This isn't a response to a single murder. This is something bigger. Father Bellini grabs his coat and walks outside. The street is chaos. Police are everywhere, setting up roadblocks, questioning people, searching cars. He sees Detective Sullivan standing on the corner of Hester and Mulberry, directing officers, his face grim. Father Bellini approaches. "What's happening?" Sullivan looks at him, and for the first time, Father Bellini sees something like vindication in his eyes. "We got a tip. Anonymous call came in about 2 hours ago. Told us where to find enough evidence to put Carlo Corelli, Vincent Vitale, and what's left of the Lombardis away for life. Bank records, ledgers, witness statements, photographs, everything. It's all there." Father Bellini feels the ground shift beneath him. Who made the call? We don't know. The caller used a payphone, wouldn't give a name. But whoever it was, they knew everything. Dates, amounts, names. They gave us the whole operation on a silver platter. Sullivan pauses. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Father? Father Bellini shakes his head. No, I don't. But even as he says it, he realizes he does know. Carlo Corelli made that call. Carlo, who stood in a cold basement last night and told Father Bellini he was going to kill Joseph Lombardi. Carlo, who asked for absolution and was refused. Carlo, who walked away knowing that Father Bellini had finally said no. Carlo didn't kill Joseph Lombardi. He turned himself in. He turned all of them in. Because if he couldn't have absolution, if he couldn't have forgiveness, then at least he could have honesty. At least he could confess his sins to someone who would do something about them. We're going to clean this neighborhood up, Sullivan says. It's going to take time, but we're going to do it. And maybe, just maybe, people can start living normal lives again. He walks away, leaving Father Bellini standing on the corner, watching the police work, watching the neighborhood transform before his eyes. The families are finished. The war is over. And Father Bellini, who spent 6 years keeping their secrets, is suddenly, surprisingly, free. He should feel relieved. He should feel vindicated. He should feel like justice has been served. But all he feels is empty. The year is 1952, and in a basement beneath a shuttered butcher shop on Mulberry Street, they find what's left of Father Bellini. The coroner will not release photographs. The police report is typed, then locked in a drawer that no one opens for 33 years. When a young detective asks his captain why the case was never investigated, the captain lights a cigarette, stares out the window at the rain, and says only this: "Some confessions should never be heard." But that's not quite true, because Father Bellini's confession was heard, just not in the way anyone expected. 3 days after the police raid, Father Bellini disappears. He's last seen leaving the presbytery on a Friday afternoon, wearing his black coat and carrying nothing. He tells no one where he's going. He simply walks out the door and never comes back. His body is found 2 weeks later by a group of children playing in an abandoned building. He's in the basement, hanging from a pipe, a rope around his neck, his face purple and swollen. There's no note, no explanation, just the body of a man who couldn't live with himself anymore. The police investigate briefly, but there's no evidence of foul play. The church holds a small funeral, attended by a handful of people. Old women who remember him from Mass, Detective Sullivan paying his respects, a few former parishioners who knew him before he became the confessor to the mob. Carlo Corelli and Vincent Vitale send flowers from prison. Joseph Lombardi, who survived the war only to die of a heart attack 6 months later, sends nothing. Father Bellini is buried in a cemetery outside the city, far from Mulberry Street, far from San Gennaro, far from the confessional booth, where he spent 6 years listening to sins he could never absolve. His gravestone is simple: Carmine Bellini, 1898-1952, priest. No one comes to visit. No one leaves flowers. His name is forgotten within a year, erased from memory like water erasing footprints in sand. But in certain circles, in certain conversations held in darkness and whispered behind closed doors, people still talk about Father Bellini. They talk about the priest who heard too much. They talk about the confessions that destroyed him. They talk about the night he finally said no, and how that single moment of defiance cost him everything. Some say he was a coward who took the easy way out. Some say he was a martyr who died for his principles. Some say he was neither, just a man who made a deal with the devil and couldn't live with the price. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Father Bellini was not a saint, but he was not a monster either. He was simply a man who found himself in an impossible situation and made the only choices he could see. And when those choices became unbearable, when the weight of guilt and complicity and silence became too much, he chose the only escape left to him. The neighborhood goes on. The families are broken, but new ones rise to take their place. The confessional booth at San Gennaro remains, and a new priest comes to hear confessions. The people kneel and confess their sins, and the priest absolves them, and life continues as it always has. But sometimes late at night, when the church is empty and the votive candles have burned down to nothing, people say they can hear a voice in the confessional booth. A voice speaking Latin, granting absolution for sins that can never be forgiven. A voice that sounds tired and hollow and infinitely sad. They say it's Father Bellini's ghost, still hearing confessions, still serving the neighborhood even in death. But others say it's just the wind or the old buildings settling, or the imagination of guilty minds seeking patterns in chaos. The truth, like so much else about Father Bellini's life, remains a secret. A confession that was heard but never recorded, a sin that was committed but never absolved. And in the end, maybe that's fitting, because the confessor of the mob, the man who knew all their secrets, took his own secrets to the grave. And there they remain, buried deep, waiting for judgment that will never come. The year is 1952, and Father Carmine Bellini is dead. The neighborhood remembers him for a moment, then forgets. The church replaces him and moves on. The police close his case and file his report. And in a basement beneath a shuttered butcher shop on Mulberry Street, the silence holds all the confessions that were too evil for anyone to hear. The silence holds the truth about who Father Bellini was, what he did, and why he had to die. The silence in the end is the only absolution he ever received, and the only one